Hi everyone, it's Kathy. Thank you so much for joining me. I am back with another Fun in the Sun Hippos card using those super cute hippos from Whimsy stamps. I started out with this little girl on a piece of Cougar Super Smooth cardstock, and I had stamped her using My Favorite Things Extreme Black Hybrid ink. The very first thing I did before adding in any of my shadows was I went in with my C1 marker and kind of imagined where the line of her bikini bottoms would actually cover her bottom and end at her lower back. I drew a line really lightly with my C1 marker, and then I colored in her bottom with that C1 marker, just to remind myself that I want her little tush to be a lot lighter than the rest of her body, because obviously she's been at the beach and she's gotten herself a little bit of a tan. Now, I did recently, within the past few days, post my other video showing exactly how I colored the other hippo. I'm going to leave in all of the coloring for the bottom of her body, and then I'm going to skip ahead because, again, I did the same technique. But I wanted to leave the bottom of her body in because the shading is just a tiny little bit different than the other hippo. If you've not seen that video, I'll go ahead and make sure to link to it at the end of this video. I did concentrate the darkest colors underneath the band of her little bikini bottoms and then down the back of her leg, as well as underneath the arm that is resting up against her side. I did a little bit of a shadow underneath her bikini top strap, and then I did a shadow at the bottom of her little, do they have feet? I guess it's, her hand or foot that's on her face. I did a little bit of shading at the very bottom of that hand because there would be more light at the top of her hand. I did make sure to leave quite a bit of white space on her front leg and then the very top of her arm that's resting up against her side, as well as her hand that's on her face, just to make sure that I had a really nice highlight. And I did start with my darkest color and worked out to my lightest color because of I used a blend of the blue violets and neutral grays and cool grays. Anyway, they all blend really well together. So I did start with my darkest and move out to my lightest, and I'll make sure to have all of the supplies that I used as well as all of the Copic colors that I used listed in the description box down below. So moving right along, after I was done coloring in her body, I came in and decided to give her some nice coral nail polish, and then I worked on her little yellow bikini. When I first saw this stamp, when I saw that she was actually wearing a bikini, I immediately thought that she needed to be wearing an itsy-bitsy-teeny-weeny yellow polka dot bikini. And I only used 2 colors because it's a pretty small area, but I did want them to be bright and vibrant. After I was done coloring in her bikini and her bow, I moved on to coloring in the dog. I started with E37 and added that in the areas where the shadows would be the darkest. For example, the legs that are behind the other legs, they would have a shadow being cast on them from the legs in front. And also because he's standing behind the hippo, he's going to have a little bit more shadows than I would normally do. I have a feeling that she's blocking quite a bit of sun on that dog. The other thing that I did with the E37 is along the bottom line of his face, I made sure to leave a tiny white line kind of where the top of his head meets his neck and his body, just so that when I came in with the lighter colors, there would be a little bit of a differentiation and he didn't just kind of turn into just a blob of color. The next color that I came in with was E35, and I blended out the E37, and I left very little white space for my highlight color, which is E31, simply again because she's going to be casting more of a shadow on him. I filled his nose and the little spots on his tush with a C7 marker. To add the polka dots on her little bikini, I used my white gel pen, and I started with my 0.08, so it's a little bit of a broader tip so I would get bigger polka dots. For the strap on the back of her bikini top and the bow on her head, I switched down and went to my 0.05 gel pen. I set that aside and started to work on my little circle background here, which I had a completely different idea for this card and it started to go sideways. So I kind of just set it aside and decided to do something a little bit different. To make sure that the circle stayed in place while I was doing my ink blending, I put a tiny little bit of removable adhesive on the back just to hold it in place. Then I used the antique linen and did ink blending with that using a makeup brush. For the vintage photo, I just tapped the bristles onto my circle so that they would look like there were grains of sand. For the water, I used broken china and peacock feathers. And then I grabbed my paintbrush and dipped it into some water and went over the blue area just to pick up some of that color so it would look like there were waves in the water. I did fussy cut the little hippo and then used my black pen to go around the edges just to clean up some of those cut lines. So I did the same thing for the shoreline here. I used my white gel pen and then I added a little bit of shimmer to the waves in the water with my Stardust Gel Pen. I cut a piece of patterned cardstock down to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8 and adhered that to the front of a top folding A2 size note card. I adhered my ink blended circle to a white circle that's just slightly larger so I would have a white background. I added a whole bunch of foam tape to the back of that hippo and put her in place. Off screen, I had stamped the sentiment "Oopsie" in VersaMark ink and heat embossed it with detail white embossing powder. And I had run that through my die cut machine using a fishtail banner die. It was a little bit long, so I just trimmed off the edge of it and then I adhered that. And I adhered the sentiment down flat. At that point I thought it was done, but I wanted to add just a little bit more yellow, so I brought in some yellow enamel dots and added those, and then decided that her nails needed a little bit of sparkle, so I used my Wink of Stella glitter pen. And that's it. That finishes up my card for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, I'd love it if you would. And don't forget to ring the bell so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.